Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on a question of privilege concerning my recent expulsion and the expulsion of the member for Vancouver-Granville from the Liberal caucus and a breach of the Parliament of Canada Act. The point of privilege concerns a breach of my rights and the rights of the member for Vancouver-Granville and other members' rights. While respecting the confidential nature of caucus discussions and my and the member for Vancouver-Granville's obligations to maintain confidentiality of caucus discussions, how do I know that my rights and my colleagues' rights were breached? On November the 5th, 2015, Section 49 of the Parliament of Canada Act required Liberal MPs to vote 4 times. These four votes were to be recorded. On March 21, 2019, the Honourable Member for Scarborough-Guildwood confirmed in a Toronto Star article that, with respect to the 4 required votes, quote, nothing like that ever happens in caucus, end quote. As such, this would mean that one of the recorded votes that did not occur was the rule concerning caucus expulsions. This also means that one of the recorded votes that did not occur was the rule for readmission of a member to the caucus. When the Prime Minister and his office prevented Liberal members of Parliament from exercising their rights under Section 49.8, they violated the rights of Liberal members in 3 ways. First, the Prime Minister deprived members of their right under Section 49.8 to vote 4 times in a recorded manner. Second, in depriving members of their right to vote, the Prime Minister denied members the opportunity to adopt the rules in Section 49.2 and 49.3 concerning caucus expulsions and caucus readmittance, respectively. In doing so, the Prime Minister deprived members of their rights to determine the expulsion of a caucus colleague on a secret ballot vote and their right to determine the readmittance of a Liberal member to the caucus on a secret ballot vote. And third, in denying members their right to vote and adopt the expulsion rule in Section 49.2 and the readmission rule in Section 49.3, the Prime Minister denied members being considered for expulsion or readmission the right to a due process, one that is not ad hoc, not arbitrary, nor unlawful. With respect to expulsion specifically, Section 49.2 lays out a clear process for expulsion, and the bar is deliberately set high. First, at the time, on April 2nd, at least 36 Liberal MPs would have had to write to the caucus chair requesting an expulsion. And second, a majority of the entire caucus, not just a majority of MPs present, would have had to vote in favour of expulsion in a secret ballot, an absolute majority. In other words, on April 2nd, 2019, when I and the member for Vancouver-Granville were expelled by the Prime Minister, the Liberal caucus had 179 members, which means that at least 90 Liberal MPs would have been required to vote in favour of expulsion in a secret ballot. If only 120 MPs showed up to vote, 90 votes in favour of expulsion would still have been required. The Prime Minister stated at the April 2nd open meeting of the Liberal caucus and on national television that, quote, I have taken the decision to expel, quote, the honourable members from caucus. The Prime Minister added that he had met with me and the member for Vancouver-Granville to inform us of his decision. This confirms that we were expelled prior to the commencement of the Liberal caucus meeting. The Prime Minister's words that night to the Liberal caucus are important to underscore because expulsion should not be his decision to take unilaterally. However, the decision had been already made. Mr. Speaker, members of Parliament are not accountable to the Leader. The Leader is accountable to members of Parliament. This is a constitutional convention. I cannot adequately underscore how important this part of the confidence convention is. In fact, it is so critical to the functioning of our institutions that the last Parliament decided to take part of that unwritten constitutional convention and enshrine it in legislation to make an amendment to the Parliament of Canada Act. This question of privilege is timely. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, you ruled on a question of privilege raised by the member for Perth Wellington. Respectfully, that response does not address our situation or our concerns. First, the response to the question from the member from Perth Wellington concerned the member for Whitby who resigned from caucus and was not expelled. This is not the circumstance with respect to myself or the member for Vancouver-Granville. Second, we are not asking that this House deal with the possible expulsion of a specific member of caucus as a question of privilege. Rather, the matter of privilege is with respect to knowing which rules apply with regard to expulsion and readmission. This is necessary in order to ensure due process, fairness, and that the rule of law is respected. The Speaker's response to a point of order raised on December 10, 2015 by the member of Wellington-Halton Hills indicates that the chair of the Liberal caucus did indeed inform the Speaker in accordance with section 49.8(5) of the Parliament of Canada Act, but that the content of such notice would not be made public. The Speaker stated that, quote, all actions required by the Act to be taken by the Speaker have been taken, end quote. Recently, my honourable colleague, the member from Vancouver-Granville, inquired of the Liberal caucus chair, the member for Lac-Saint-Louis, by email no less than 4 times asking for clarity on the rules that apply respecting expulsion from the Liberal caucus. We were anticipating that an expulsion was imminent, as was being reported in the media. The expulsions have now taken place. However, we still do not know the rules and so cannot determine if they were followed. Notwithstanding the Parliament of Canada Act, the rules of this place, points of order or points of privilege, or inquiries we have made of our former colleagues, both myself and the member for Vancouver-Granville still do not know what rules applied to our expulsion, nor what rules would apply to any readmission. Third, Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge that you have stated that you have no role in the interpretation of a statute or in the conduct of these 2015 provisions, but with respect, it is our view that this does not relieve you of your responsibility to ensure that all members are aware of their rights in this place. This is our privilege. Accordingly, a remedy is required for our situation. This matter is urgent and cannot wait for new standing orders. Procedural fairness and the rule of law demand this. Secret in-camera meetings or private notices should not be a shield to prevent the upholding of the law and members' rights. I ask that you find a prima facie case of privilege to ensure that the rights of members, both for expulsion and readmission, are upheld and are consistent with the law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The 2 former cabinet ministers who were kicked out of the Liberal caucus in the wake of the SNC-Lavalin affair are fighting back. Jane Philpott rose in the House of Commons today and said the PM violated both her and Jody Wilson-Raybould's rights when he removed them from the party caucus. That move comes as CBC News has learned of mass resignations in Philpott's Toronto area riding. Katie Simpson has the details from Ottawa.
So last night there was a meeting of the Markham-Stouffville Federal Liberal Association. That's a group of volunteers that had worked with Jane Philpott in the 2015 election to help get her elected. These groups exist in every single riding for all the major parties, and they work with the candidate on the ground to try and help get them elected. What has gone on over the past couple of months with the SNC-Lavalin affair, we have now seen mass resignations from this board. 10 volunteers have quit. 2 are planning to quit once they can be replaced. 3 are staying on and 1 is undecided. So that is the majority of the 16 people on this team. There was a group meeting last night. Most of the resignations were submitted last night and/or are in the process of being submitted. We spoke with one member of that volunteer team, Leah Knutson. She says it's more nuanced than to say this is some sort of protest against the Prime Minister. They still plan on voting, or she says, she's speaking for herself, she still plans to vote Liberal. She still plans to support the Prime Minister, but she is so deeply disappointed that the Prime Minister hasn't taken responsibility, she says, for what's gone on in this situation, and she's just deeply hurt. Have a listen.
If a party is like a family, okay, and there's disagreements in the family, do you kick your kids out? If I kicked my children out every time I had a disagreement with them, I'd have no children left. So that being said, in a party, you should be able to voice your opinion in terms of what you believe to be true or what is important in terms of your own personal values.
So the reason this is so important is that these are the people that help get the local candidates. They really work with the candidates on the ground in the community. They organize phone banks, they organize volunteering, that sort of thing. So these are the key players that really help overall with the party. Their roles might not get a lot of attention, but they're certainly valuable, especially those who have a lot of experience in different campaigns. These are the people that really help work to get these candidates elected.
And earlier today, we in fact also got a chance to hear from Jane Philpott herself, and she was talking about the expulsions of her and Jody Wilson-Raybould from the Liberal caucus. What did she say on that front?
Well, Jane Philpott, who is now an independent MP, stood up in the House of Commons and made the allegation that her rights have been breached because she and Jody Wilson-Raybould were kicked out of caucus without a full caucus vote. The whole situation, again, is more nuanced than just that, but have a listen to what she said in the House of Commons a short time ago.
The Prime Minister added that he had met with me and the member for Vancouver-Granville to inform us of his decision. This confirms that we were expelled prior to the commencement of the Liberal caucus meeting. The Prime Minister's words that night to the Liberal caucus are important to underscore because expulsion should not be his decision to take unilaterally. However, the decision had been already made. Mr. Speaker, members of Parliament are not accountable to the Leader. The Leader is accountable to members of Parliament. This is a constitutional convention.
Now, the argument that Jane Philpott is making, she's making reference to a 2014 private members bill presented by Conservative MP Michael Chong that urged all parties, or that says all parties must have a vote if they're going to expel someone from caucus. The thing is, though, neither the Liberals nor the NDP subscribed to that to that set of rules. Jane Philpott's arguing her rights have been breached. The Speaker is saying it's not his position to rule on this. And we're waiting to get a response from either the Prime Minister's office or the Whip's office. You'll remember Jane Philpott was kicked out of caucus along with Jody Wilson-Raybould. It was last week. It might seem like months ago, but it was only last week. After there were a series of meetings at the regional level, as well as different groups within the Liberal caucus met to discuss the idea. Jane Philpott has said publicly a couple of times that she is frustrated that she did not get to meet with all of caucus. However, she did meet with Ontario caucus twice on this issue. We do know that. And all of the regional caucus chairs, as well as the other groups within caucus that discuss this issue, they met with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister made his decision. However, Jane Philpott clearly believes that her rights have been violated and that this issue should be examined.
And that is the CBC's Katie Simpson in Ottawa. Now, as Katie mentioned, at the time, there hadn't been a response just yet from the Prime Minister, and that has just come into our newsroom right now, a response to the statements that were made by Jane Philpott in the House. He spoke very briefly, and here is what Trudeau had to say.
The will of caucus was very clear, but I made the decision.
All right, so that is what the Prime Minister had to say. He was speaking also for the first time, so that was his response to Philpott's comments earlier today.